Welcome back, everyone. We move on now to our final panel of the day, and it is devoted to a topic that is generating passionate debate and no small level of anxiety, whether in the virtual world or at the many, many conferences that I attend, namely the digital transformation of business models and the implications for workers. And just out of interest, I typed the buzzword future of work into Google last night to see where things stand and got over 300 million hits for future of work. Definitely a topic that has people thinking and worrying. With technology automating factories and offices at a breathtaking pace, what skills and competences are tomorrow's workers going to need? What new categories of knowledge workers could evolve? And who should provide what sort of training and when? What does continuing education mean when change is so constant and so swift? Those are some of the questions that our very able panel will explore. And later on, of course, they'll also take up your questions, ladies and gentlemen, so do use the pigeonhole or the embedded microphones to put your questions to the panel. It will be chaired by the head of the Department for Information and Communication Technologies at the Center for European Economic Research, Irene Bercek, who will take the stage right after introductory remarks. And that input will come from Xiao Wen Hon. I hope that was more or less correct. He's Corporate Vice President at Microsoft and Chairman of Microsoft's Asia Pacific R&D Group. So a very warm welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to Melinda for a nice introduction. So we talk about digital transformation, and what's a digital transformation? So I use kind of this chart diagram to illustrate how I view the digital transformation. No matter whether you study science or engineering, right? I think all the process we're trying to reiterate, whether we're trying to iterate physics experiment, or trying to build a product, or trying to iterate an idea, and typically, we actually have some hypothesis or some product or some experiment we put in the real world, what I call an actuator, trying to put in the real world. And then we put a sensor, and sensor can be any phone, and trying to get the data, come back, we analyze, and then find out the inside. Then we actually make a decision, what's the next product, what's the next idea, what's the next experiment we're trying to do. And then I think what's digital, we always do that. The history of the humankind is just like this for everything. But just now with the abundant computation and the digital data, particularly the IoT, we can connect to the real world, getting the data in the real-time fashion. We can also change. Very soon, using all kinds of actuators to change the real world, doing all kinds of experiments we want to do. So that's really, we can very quickly close the feedback loop. And then the more we can close the feedback loop, and more likely we'll improve things. So I think this concept, well, there are many different words. Here we use the digital transformation. I think the industry 4.0, China we call manufacture 2025, and all this actually mean the same thing. And then I think in terms of company, what do we view digital transformation? I think at least 4 categories. Every company, every organization must have product, even including university, education institution. The product is their teaching, teach the student to learn. And then you can use the feedback loop I described to actually make sure every new product you actually have actually improve over the previous one, right? So I think so really transform your product. And then second thing is every company also have customer. Well, either you have a to B, to business, then you have business customer. To C, you have a consumer as your customer. Actually, some industry, you don't really change your product. I mean, some example I will make is Coca-Cola. When they change the formula, people still love to drink this so-called classic flavor. But even that, their customer they need to engage. I think a while ago, the unfortunate thing happened for the United Airlines. Those are kind of typical example how we can use the digital transformation to connect to your customer better, engage with your customer better. And then this is not just the reactive when customers complain. You can also do proactive to actually use the fan of your product. For instance, using the Coca-Cola as an example, I think they have a best fan in Warren Buffett. I mean, he always say every day he drinks 5 cans of the Coca-Cola. So how do you engage those fans to be part of your marketing, right? So I think that's also the example how digital transformation can actually engage your customer better. And then the final two are more internal. Each company, of course, has their internal operation. And then how do you use the digital transformation to make your operation more efficient, more effective, right? So that's also very, very the important thing. And then the last but not least, every company eventually the biggest asset will be their employees. So how do you use the digital transformation, make your employee both productive, also take care of their family? I mean, in some company we call work-life balance, because you want your employee to be able to actually effective work on a longer-term basis. And not to mention, I think that you can also use a digital transformation to realize your employees' potential, even make them creative, to come up with a creative idea to help the company to transform. So I think the digital transformation really for each company, which is, like I said, each company, including every organization in the world, really need to think about these 4 dimensions. And so I think talking about the real example, and I think one of the things which happened in the industry, particularly Germany, the Industrial 4.0, is something we call predictive maintenance. I mean, every piece of equipment, every piece of the instrument in factory or even in elevator, now with actually ability to get the data, so instead of you actually fix the stuff when they are broken, you actually can do predictive maintenance by knowing, oh, this equipment is about to go kind of abnormal. So you actually figure out maybe you just need to put additional lubricant. Maybe you just need to put some filter, right? So I think the predictive maintenance happen everywhere, including ourselves. You talk about digital transformation in the health industry, the precision medicine, predictive maintenance. I think all this wearable, and particularly going to the future, is totally possible in the near future when something not happening right in our body. For instance, the cancer cell over some certain threshold, we are able to actually detect automatically at the earliest possible time. So I think the chance of cure will be much, much higher. So here is the real.
As an airline pilot, I know that to fly with the best, you need to work with the best. With over 13,000 engines in operation around the globe, Rolls-Royce provides the services to maintain them at peak performance. Today, each engine has thousands of sensors that can produce terabytes of data on long-haul flights. Making sense of all that data is critical in transporting my passengers safely and efficiently. Rolls-Royce uses Azure IoT Suite to analyze data remotely and deliver real-time, actionable insights to me and to the airlines about engine performance and operational efficiencies. Advanced analytics help us optimize fuel economy, anticipate maintenance needs, and avoid costly downtime and delays. A single unscheduled disruption and its knock-on effect to a fleet and the passengers can cost an airline up to $1 million a day. With early notice, our team can proactively have parts at the right place and time, reducing inventory costs and maximizing availability. Up to 1/3 of a plane's weight is fuel. As a pilot, I decide how much fuel my plane carries. Insights into engine efficiency, weather conditions, flight path, and scheduled landings impact my decision. Cortana Intelligence helps me choose the optimal fuel level to maximize efficiency. With 40% of our operating budget devoted to fuel, even a small percentage reduction can save us tens of millions of dollars each year. Microsoft and Rolls-Royce, reaching new heights in customer value.
Well, I think this video, you can forget about the mention of the particular product or company name. This is just a very typical example of the company actually used the digital transformation. In the short video, it is show two scenarios. One is the predictive maintenance of a Rolls-Royce engine, the aircraft engine. The other, which is, you can say it's both, it can be either the operation, could also be a new service on top of the product they offer to the customer. And then the second one is like you will actually even provide additional service for actually the aircraft to actually prepare the optimal fuel they need to load for each of these trips. So I think that's just the typical example of the digital transformation. And then in this section, I think the particular on today in the GLC related to how do we prepare the both potential employees, which are currently student learning, and the existing employee in the company for this digital transformation. And I think in the previous section, we talk about the university, higher ed, K-12, talking about how to prepare students. And I think the one thing I certainly want to point out is the digital ICT technology, or so-called computer science technology, is no longer just belong to science and engineering student. I think for everyone, I mean, whether you work on sales and marketing and then all kinds of positions, you really need to use computer as a tool. And more than the tool, something with a group of people call computational thinking. The algorithm aspect of computer science is really the way we're trying to solve problems. How do we actually teach the student have a better problem-solving skill? It's almost as important as learning to learn. And then I think once the student get into a company, how do we, as a company, how do we actually help for their lifelong learning? And then one thing certainly which not yet be touched upon is, I think particularly in the company, which the employee don't necessarily have this student peer learning group while they are in school. Then I think the digital means like social network, which will be good place for people to find mentor, to even find some peer learning, which I think it's actually, it could be one important element of the learning required. And then I think I want to close by, I know there are many reports about AI going to disrupt the workplace and going to replace a lot of jobs. But I think if you really, the disruption of the workplace always happens when there are new technology coming. But I think always the technology, including so-called AI, big data, all these machines, eventually they are just tools. I think remember, all this AI, so-called AI or machine, the program always comes from human. Algorithm always comes from human. So I think it's important for us to really to help the future generation, to help our employees to really use computer the same way we cannot run fast. We actually invent the car. We cannot fly. We actually invent the airplane. And we can compute, but we don't compute fast enough. This is why we invent computer. Computer eventually is just a piece of computer. And I think it's a tool for us to use. If we can do that, and I think the job, there are plenty of the job out there, and I think we will make a better world. Okay, thanks.
So, thank you, Xiao Wenhong, for your introduction. And now I would like to welcome the other panelists. So, to the very left, there is Norbert Jansen. Norbert Janssen is Director of Human Resources from IBM Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And so he is leading a human resource department in a company where digital transformation is in the DNA of all employees. Welcome, Norbert Janssen. The next panelist is Günther Schuh. Günther Schuh is Director of the Laboratory of Machine Tools and Production Engineering, WCL, at RWTH Aachen University, and at the same time Presidium member of ACATEC. And his main interest focuses on the transformation of manufacturing industry due to Industry 4.0. So welcome, Günther Schuh. And last but not least, there is Harald Melcher from M2M. He is educational and digitization expert with more than 25 years of industry experience. He has a strong link to educational resources and services, also for vocational learning and training, through more than 250 member companies of the Didakta Verband. So Didakta is Germany's biggest educational industry association. And practically, he is involved in the digital transformation projects, especially in the media industry. And besides of that, he is also a member of the Committee Education and Working Environment of the German IT Industry Association, Bitkom. So welcome, Harald Melcher. So, in fact, now I would like to start you with your statements, and the first one is Norbert Janssen, please.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, and yeah, a quick statement maybe from my side. So, as a CHRO, I heard a comment 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago, and a person told me mostly it's the HR department who is not transforming the company or is not transforming themselves to help the company to transform. I think we try at least to see it the other way around and to show it to our business. We, as a company, had a big change 5-6 years ago. Old models didn't run very well, so we focused on a new strategy based on cloud, artificial intelligence, quantum processors, etc. So, which of course needs a new environment. As an HR leader, you have to focus what is necessary to help the people to transform themselves and to move into this new era of the company. So what we did at the beginning, of course, you have also business unit leaders who define the strategies. We implemented new tools, and that's what you can do as an HR leader very quickly. But the most difficult thing, of course, was the digital transformation in skills. So what kind of skills do the people have? And so the most important project for us was really the skill assessment at the beginning, to identify the gap, because it not really helps me as a company if I have new technology. I like the chart we saw a few minutes ago. We can create a customer engagement. We can tell the customer that we have new products, but if I do not transform my team, these people will not be able to deliver what I expect from them, to clarify with the client what the advantage is of the new product, etc. So what we did was a skill assessment for our 400,000 employees worldwide, and we identified every job role, and we matched these skills with the target model, what we want to achieve. And since this year, we are on a journey, and I think you never will end a journey of transformation. At least this digital journey will go on, and produce things like a digital new learning platform, because we didn't saw on the market a platform which really fulfills the expectation we have. We brought in the artificial intelligence, we changed the leadership framework, and all these things will shows me as an HR department that you can change the environment if you want, and that HR really plays a big part of the transformation in a company, because at the end you only will be successful if you get the employee engagement, which was here on the chart, besides operational excellence to deliver your clients as best as possible. So that's an incoming statement from my side. I think we will talk about the things we changed, can describe some examples, and I'm happy to join this group and to share my experience we got out of the last 5 years here.
Okay, thank you. So Günther Schuh, please.
Well, perhaps I can get some slides. You know, I'm a full-time professor, so I like to have PowerPoints to explain my stuff. The very old-fashioned, I know, and the next decade we will do that differently. I think the important part for us is what we in Germany like to call Industry 4.0, and Akatech as the academy behind that, the kind of official inventor of that term and the concept behind Industry 4.0. We believe there is a huge change, especially in terms of the role that industry had in education, in all kinds of education in the past, and even more in the future. And some things are perhaps a bit differently, I believe, in industry than we heard that in that very impressive discussion before. And just the important part is we have the digitalized and connected world. We as engineers, we don't like the term now that digitalization has started, because we say, okay, that was 25 years ago. We have no machine tools without numerical control anymore. We have no designer designing on hand and without finite element and CAD systems. However, now the processes will significantly change. And for research, first of all, it changed a lot because the world becomes a lab. We had our tiny labs for each specific technology, what we had at universities and other places. But now any entity, any machine is accessible and is part of our lab if we want to. And it's a learning lab, it's a learning environment. So first step, it's an increasingly interconnected process chain or processes, and that will require a lot of new types of work. And that's the different working or a training on the job. I mean, industry was all the time the place where a big part of the societal education took place. And especially in industry, a lot of these people in society in all times were trained who were not so likely in, or not so, that they didn't like to be trained in a school. And industry did a great job in the past, and perhaps we can do that, can do that even better in the future, because it's not much better and easier to do now training on the job in an Industry 4.0 environment. Third is, it needs different formats. And in my recognition, now the picture becomes to be, or gets complete. We had a training and an educational system that was missing important parts. And we are just getting these important parts to conclude, to fill up all possible ways, so that anybody who is trained can be trained on the job in more practical environment, in more theoretical courses, in his speed, her speed. And I think that's a terrific chance. It changed university in engineering very much. I'm running, I would say, kind of 11 nano demo factories. That's my research basis, and that's my training basis. In the past, I hadn't even one real demo factory. Now I run tiny ones, like a tool and die academy, like a Industry 4.0 product process and planning factory, like a ramp-up factory. These are my factories where I did research in former times on, but I didn't run the real factory. So training was difficult on that. And if we did training, we did higher education training, but not training for the students. Now we use these devices and these entities for training of both, of the young students and of the higher education programs. And they're really filling a big gap. We can size in terms of scaling the approach very much. And one is that we can put more self-determination on the side of those people who are our employees and want to make a career in our facility, in our company. And we always hear about we have to train the young people to work with these devices. My experience in industrial engineering is different. I have to be trained to be capable to use at least 20% of that. The young people I'm standing in front of, they know how to do that. I just have to let them in with all their devices and capabilities. We are just about to develop, let's say, 100 apps for just an industry floor, production floor in our demo factories. And these are control helps, these provide transparency, but these are learning tools. And for me, these 100 apps is my inner company, in the real company for which we prepare that, is my inner company Google. I mean, just to have that is training. Whenever I have a question, a technical question, a translation question, I always get quick and reasonable answer. And industry, the learning curve in industry in the past was limited because it was like the production process in industry or the invention process. It's a long line of searching and waiting. And nowadays, you ask somebody, I want to change that as a mechanical engineering trainer. I want to change that. I need this and that, and okay. And normally the people try to go away and say, okay, when do I get it? And expect an answer, I get it in 2 weeks. And nowadays, you have that. And you can say, stay here, you get it now. Just push the button. And that is the big change, that we can learn what we do every day. The world is a lab, and the world and the production facility is not only a lab, a research lab, it's a training facility in its best form. We were trying to do that in the past. I think that was a big portion of education in society in the past. But now we can complete that. And that's a terrific chance, and I think we should use it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So Harald Melcher, please.
Yeah, thank you. Before I start with my thesis, I would make some 2 remarks in advance. I think you all listened very carefully to what happened during the last 6 or 7 hours here. My impression is that we are entering into a phase of repeating things on this Congress. Seems to be true somehow. And it looks as if the whole auditorium, including the various groups which are standing here, are converging in their opinions, in their views, in their view of necessities, and so on. The second remark is the digital transfer topic produces, in my point of view, a kind of matrix. We have the various educational subsystems, school, higher ed, learning for vocational purposes in companies. And we have some core topics of learning and teaching in the digital transformation age, I would say, and they form a matrix. So we repeat the core topics in all of the subsystems, and they are somehow the same. It's quite interesting to me. One of my learnings of today, having this in mind, you will see that I will repeat a lot of things which you've already heard today. I try to focus on some more general aspects. And I cordially invite you to have a very lively discussion with us in this last panel of the day. We would all have profits from this. My first thesis is very short, and it's important for me. The omnipresent demand for coding skills for almost everybody, which I'm hearing since months and 1 or 2 years now, is not a concept. It's a shortcut. And I'm saying this because I had the idea to think a little bit about why do companies suffer from missing concepts for digital transformation and for the transfer of the transformation to their staff, which is in a certain way teaching and learning, education. And is this true worldwide, or is this true at all? And this is, from my point of view, open to the discussion. The second thesis is our topic needs a broader view for a sufficient approach. Details, models, new insights were presented already by my colleagues, and we will discuss it further on during our panel. We've seen, Hon presented it, a certain simple model of the structure of digitization in companies with the actors, sensors, and so on. And to me, it's important to refer especially also to the human beings, because we have a lot of technology and technological components and processes, but at the end, we have the human beings who develop this and who want to profit from this. As human beings, we are necessarily in this surrounding confronted with, or one may also say we take over it as a big leap in our evolution, new or at least more dominating tasks, new roles and new opportunities. Just some headwords for this. Such processes, we're discussing now the digital transformation, hopefully will open us the opportunity to be more creative. We can create more. We have more time and space to evaluate things, not just to work in a simple way, but we can evaluate things. We can think about it. This is related to processes within a company, but also social processes and so on, where all these internal company processes take place in. We have the opportunity to establish new things, and hopefully in a more disruptive way, because we now have the means for this. We have the opportunity to control and to coordinate things more focused. Probably we have the necessity to main these, but this will be done more and more automatically. And finally, we have the opportunity, and this is very important to the whole topic of this Congress, we have the opportunity to learn more and better and more selected and in a different way. So we can learn the basics, which we need to understand the world. We can learn all of what we heard today. We have the opportunity to learn every day all the daily changes which take place and are of relevance for us. And we have the need and opportunity to learn the learning in a different way. Regarding learning and the corresponding role of teaching, I think what's important to stress is we are faced with a completely new situation which we never had before. Digitization is global, is fast, is even self-accelerating, is affecting almost everything, is complex, and what is even more important, nobody can avoid it. We are all faced with it, if we want or not. Contrary to this, education, the educational systems and educational innovation are generally slow. And this is one of our core problems. Education is too slow for digitization at the moment. One good reason for this Congress. The aims of digitization still have to be defined, in my point of view. They are implicitly defined by technology and by the means and opportunities technology offers, but I think we should define it once again in a very well-reflected process by ourselves. There is growing but still no general acceptance of the limited effectiveness of conventional models of learning and teaching, but we have a no longer media-adequate approach in a broader sense. We have to work on this. But new models of teaching and learning still have to be developed. And we heard some different approaches during this day, but, and you have heard about examples like just-in-time learning, peer learning, artificial intelligence, adaptive learning, learning analytics, and all these buzzwords. But we have still no convincing, well-integrated model. And I would cordially invite all the scientific community, members of the scientific community among us, please develop this, please focus on this to integrate our knowledge a little bit more. If we take this big gap and compare companies with higher ed and universities, I think universities, there's an interesting difference in my point of view. Universities already develop many different and sophisticated concepts for how to deal with digitization, teaching, and learning. But they show no or limited or only tentative doing. We heard about this in the first panel after lunch. Companies, on the contrary, in a certain way lack of concepts. That's what I hear in many different workshops and discussion rounds. Or these are very focused and limited, but they are good in technology, production, output-oriented doing. And they just pilot. And I think if we combine both areas, then this would solve some of our problems and lead to a much better outcome. Finally, due to the above-mentioned development, lifelong learning is unavoidable, and this is one thing which almost every speaker today mentioned already. I think ideally we should develop a basic digital world curriculum concerning hardware, software, range of applications, general principles of IT, new or latest developments, a kind of SWOT analysis about the whole thing, about data protection, privacy, legal things, and so on. And this is an open curriculum which is dynamic and which has to be developed every day for new developments which we are faced with. This is an insight after many discussions which I had concerning this topic. And it's something like the 21st century skills. Because learning doesn't start at the first day in a plant or office, it would be necessary to redesign the whole educational system. And if you look at further education, which is somehow the thing which is taking place in companies also, digital transformation is at least partly curing earlier mistakes happening in the school system, for example. And my last remark, we should keep in mind that digitization is not everything in life, and that first of all, we need to define or agree upon the goals of digitization, which means there is no pedagogy without values. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to all of you for your statements. So from the statements, I think we can identify two main issues. One is referring to the digital skills of employees, and the other one is referring to the concepts we need to improve these skills, and therefore we could use digital media again. But let me first come to the digital skills. So you all said that more or less people who enter the companies, they already have a lack of digital skills. Is this true? And which skills are really lacking? Maybe Norbert Janssen.
Yeah, maybe I can tell you something about the practical part here. As an IT company, I think every person who joins a company have digital skills, and he have to, otherwise we wouldn't hire him. But we make a better experience for ourselves if people came from University of Applied Science. They are more focused on this usage of digital skills. Their behavior fits more to the environment they come in. However, it's based also on the personal behavior afterwards, after you hired a person. Because whatever skills they have, if they join a company, at the end, it's their knowledge how to use the skills and how to adapt new digital skills and how to move around, how to make their career in this new environment. So this is much more important for me than have a special knowledge, because knowledge is something I personally think which is given in the future. We do not have to learn at university, but it's the way how to use this given knowledge and how to interpret what is on the table and make decisions out of it. And I think this is important for us, that people who come from universities learn at universities how to use knowledge and how to act with others in this self-empowered environment they join. If they join a company with new structures, with new organizational forms, and companies who want to transform in this digital way.
Okay, may I add one result that we found? Our institute and TNS, they made a survey among German companies, and it was about what is the need, what do you think your employees should be trained on? And 82% of the companies said their employees need training on data security. And coding, programming was only mentioned by 51% of the companies. So Günther Schuh, you said there is a digital gap between older and younger people with respect to using digital technologies like the smartphone. But what about data security issues?
Well, data security is an issue, and we have to train more on that. But I doubt the other things. I doubt that it's necessary more than we do significantly now. I mean, there is no German engineer who has not learned to program some software and who has not learned to read software architecture and knows how to deal with the database. You can always increase that, but having digital natives is for me not that anybody in the company, besides yours, of course, has to be a software engineer and has to be a programmer, and not even an IT security expert. What we need to have is people who can really deal with several, and that is the integrating function of internet-based connectivity between application software. That's a capability what's necessary. In the past, we were educating specialists. I mean, a mechanical engineering specialist, he was capable, he was well trained to use a CAD, a design software system. Perhaps that mechanical engineer was also able to use a finite element software. But most of those are not able to use a supply chain management software, because that is more a thing that the business administration people have learned. And we are the experts, especially in Germany, we are the vertical deep dive experts in our education, in our job description, and in our software systems. But if I would use, let's say, for a numerical control of a machine tool, some compensation software from finite element to compensate that in process, that's possible if you can compensate that set of data. but you need to be capable to read both sets of data and deal with both application softwares. And we have, at least in an industry firm, we have at least 15 different big software tools. ERP, SCM, CAD, PLM, CRM, and you name it. And there is almost nobody who can deal with more than one or two of these tools. And that hinders almost everything in processes. So we have to train people in that horizontal networking, in that horizontal integration to work interdisciplinary. And you know, in the past, that was programming capability, was being able to use Excel. And program was, you have your hidden source of data depicted from some application software in your hidden tool, and you were programming that and making special whatever with it. And that was it. Now you want to have access with that button from almost anybody, or at least a limited number of people in the company from various departments to have access on that. That needs to have anybody needs to have the capability to deal with all the neighbor software entities or tools. And we are far away from that, and that will be the next benefit or the next big move, I guess.
Harald Melcher, you would like to add on that?
I just want to add one short aspect to the question of what is lacking when the people are entering their work life. And I think it's very important, and it's probably something which is not only special for Germany, but at least in Germany, which I know quite well, of course, we have the situation that the school system simply does not teach enough and transfers enough knowledge, and also process knowledge, and in a wider sense, things like data protection and other things to the pupils and to the students, so that they have a good basis, that they're well prepared to enter either into university or into the vocational and work system directly. That's still a big problem we are faced with. We are now starting to make efforts to improve the situation, but for the time being, and I think for the next 3 to 5 years, we are still faced with this problem. So the vocational system has to compensate these missing dimensions.
So I think all of us are either from STEM, scientist or engineer, or working for IT company. While I appreciate we can actually teach the digital skill better for scientists and engineers, but don't forget, we have probably at least 50% of the people, students, eventually actually not doing STEM, doing liberal arts, social science. And I think that's really, when we say digital transformation is global for everyone, I think that's we have a pressing needs, which is really how do we get people really have a broad and then also the preparedness for the digital transformation. So if you think deeply, in the K-12, every student, including eventually go to liberal art and the social science student, they learn 12 years of math, 5 or 6 years of physics, chemistry, and biology. And then I think the digital skills certainly grow more than just math. And we actually, today, only people who have the motivation to go into STEM, they actually probably will get some good, some good digital transformation education in K-12, but most of the students are left out. And then even when we talk about coding, if you actually go to really work with those students who actually are turned off by those coding class, because the way they teach you probably too nerdy or whatever. I mean, even the modern day program to our engineer already very simple enough, like Python, to those students who want to go to liberal and social science, still too hard. So how do we actually make it really, can really be accepted by those students? And then also when you go to college, I think again, when you go to social science and the liberal arts, the student, some of them probably will get the calculus, the course, but they probably will not get any digital transformation training. So I think that, to me, we have really a pressing need, I think, to really cover that at least I don't know the real number, but I would guess probably at least 50% of people not going to STEM eventually.
Okay, thanks. So there is a question coming up here from the audience, and I would like to, I don't know whether this works. It's the first question that I would like to show active. Okay, so companies know better what skills they need or will need in the future. Could companies from the industry disrupt universities, schools, and becoming the new learning centers? What do you think, Hon?
Absolutely no. I think as a company, Microsoft, we actually spend a lot of resource working with university, not just for research, also for curriculum, also help to have some kind of co-op program, internship program, trying to be part of the student education. But we cannot, no way we can replace university. University is just, not just university and the K-12. And I think those training we just need to rely on school. But I think the company definitely has the more than social responsibility. More than social, there's a social and economic responsibility to participate more and with the university and school during the student learning.
You would like to add?
Yeah, I think one should remember that one important task, one core task of the school is something which is not written very often, but which is in the head of everybody, I hope, because this is the function to regenerate our society, to teach values, to teach certain processes, behavior, and other things, besides certain subjects, of course, besides all the subjects. And this is a very important function, and this can't be done by companies which are acting as separate units. So I think this is one important reason why this can't take place, what is asked here. But it would be interesting, on the other hand, that companies and education institutions and the education administration enter into a much more intense exchange of information and communication about what shall be taught, what shall be learned, and what should also be knowledge which is not immediately relevant for vocational purposes, but which is useful to master one's own life.
Okay, so let me pick up another question, because this fits quite well. So which job profiles do you foresee will emerge in the next decade, which will disappear? What skills are necessary to remain employability? And let me add a little question, what about statistical skills?
So maybe from the current standpoint, because that will change as well during the next years, I would say what we are focused on, of course, are the new skills, IX skills. We buy companies as an IT department to produce commercial spots with Manuel Neuer and Coca-Cola, not because we are interested to be in that market, because these are the skills we need as an IT company. And I think that shows the direction. Yeah, it's of course coding skills, etc. you need, and this will change year by year, month by month. What will disappear, I think, is all the skills which will disappear by the automatization, all this administrative work, which I can do better with the system, typical accountant work, whatever. Also in my HR department, if I talk about careers, I say, or I recommend to my people, search a role where you are a consultant, where you can use the data and you can add value on the table of your client. That's a role which will still be available in 2, 3, 4 years, maybe in another way, maybe with new skills, but that's what you need to be still at the table. All what can what a computer, what a system, what artificial intelligence can do will disappear at the end. So, but you have to review your own skills based on what your environment is showing. So the sense and act you have to show every day, every month, every year to see what's the way is for yourself.
Two things. I think a lot of jobs in the area which are connected in logistics, in administration, which are among this searching and waiting that we have in all our industrial processes will partly disappear. Searching for pieces, searching for where is the actual order, what's the status of that. That's a push the button task in the future. You don't need a specific logistic part searcher, whatever the name is. On the other hand, I think only few other types of job will disappear, but we will have a different quote of people who or more people who are able to have, in terms of a job enrichment, a wider responsibility. I mean, we just developed as a kind of nerd gang with 50 people a serious electro car. And typically you would have said you need 2,000 people for that. Not only engineers, but a lot of others. And so I would assume in 10 years, you need just a tenth of the number of people to develop the next generation car in 10 years. And so the same gang would be able, instead of developing just one car in 3 years or 2.5 years, they will develop 10 of those. And that's probably not disappearing of jobs, but it's an enrichment, and that makes these jobs, most of those, much more interesting than in the past.
Let me add one more. Some people might use the innovation or creativity, but I will use the word improving. So if you remember my close feedback, if your job is always trying to improve things, and I think will always be demanded. And I think, of course, you need to learn the skill, how to use the tool to improve things. And I think that would never disappear. But the other thing, which might be a minority, not a lot of job, is the craftsmanship. The best stuff, well, whether it's a piece of suit or cook or dish, the cuisine, the best still made by hand, some part of made by hand. So I think the craftsmanship, I think Europe is done very well, and I think the US is much less so. And I think those jobs will be there. But even for that, I think you need to think about some part of them will actually be automated, like this so-called molecular cooking. Some of them probably will use 3D printing. Some part is made by hand. But what skill? I think you look at this. The very different people who doing improving, keep doing improving. People are doing the craftsmanship. They all also one thing in common. They also learning. I mean, so what skill? I mean, really the lifelong learning. And I think to put yourself as a growth mindset, and you will never learn it all, but you can learn it all. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So. We talked a lot about digital skills when coming from university or from vocational training to the firm as an employee. But in firms, we also have a lot of older workers, right? So what do we do with them? How can we set incentives for older employees to keep in the learning machinery? What do you do at IBM, for instance?
I think learning has nothing to do with the age. I think we have young people who are not motivated to learn. We have old people who are very motivated to learn new things. But you have to create the environment that every person has the opportunity to learn. And this is not the old way with classroom trainings and half-year school of for 20 people. It's a small sprints of learning you have to offer, which this person needs for the next role, maybe for the next project. This, of course, you have this needs to be interesting for the person. You have to be motivated to start this new experience. And of course, what we try is this gamification experience to motivate the people to learn. But of course also to show them the way forward in their career if they do the next step, and if they use the time to learn new things, they are enabled to do the next project which can enhance their career and which of course makes life much more interesting for the rest of your life. So you do not stop in your career, but people have to understand it, that they have to learn, and that's our task to show them the way, what will happen if they do it, and that's the motivational part. And I think that's for young people same as for older people, because even if you are 54, you cannot stop learning for the next 10 years, right?
I think we really should encourage anybody to do that, what we learned the whole day, that real lifelong learning is not just a phrase. And I mean, we as universities, we have that task for years in almost any German and other countries. That's our third pillar. We should provide higher education. That's, I think, written in North Rhine-Westphalia in our constitution paper of our university. It's written, but first thing, nobody gives us money for that. We just have that task, but no resources. We are not really measured on that. And so it's just our more or less entrepreneurial initiative if we do so. And if you offer that, and even if it's a couple of weeks program, even your people, that could help. I mean, not just tiny programs. And we started that in Aachen some 10 years ago. I think I have 114 programs, different programs in a year. And they wouldn't be there if not people would come to attend and to pass even certificate courses, which is just a 1-week course. And anybody, the companies, the universities, any other institutions like those one here and Fraunhofer and others should contribute that we really have a societal, understanding, common understanding that we really have as a typical behavior that we attend big or small courses and do lifelong learning with all the resources we have. We are not there, not at all yet.
But in my point of view, there's an important underlying dimension. And of course, there's a whole set of dimensions why we should practice a lifelong learning approach as a human being. But I think especially if I look today, for example, according to my experience in the media industry, it is very important for older people to understand why. The reason why. Why shall I continue learning? What is the advantage? How do I support my company system when I do some additional learning and are open for new things which I have to learn, especially concerning digitization? It is always important to have this reason why well communicated. And honestly speaking, there are a lot of companies which still today do not really transfer this and make this clear to their staff.
Okay, thank you. So since there is one question with increasing number of votes, I would like to take it up here. It's a quite general question. Does the digital age need a broader or narrower education? Horn, would you like to start?
Well, I think it's both broad and narrow, I would say. I think because I think eventually someone needs to be expert doing some certain thing. For instance, if you make a living of writing program, you got to be good about it, right? So that's really a narrow part. And I think today, the particular a lot of educators are talking about critical thinking and the character, empathy, and then all the interdisciplinary stuff. I think this is why I say company would never be able to replace the university and school. And I think those, you typically get those early on in your life, in school. And then the narrow part, I think the early on, I think our IBM colleagues mentioned, actually, I think the most company like Microsoft, I'm sure probably similar to IBM. I mean, of course, you hire those STEM students, and they have a basic the knowledge in those so-called narrow field, whether it's math or programming, all this stuff. But a lot of things we mentioned, I mean, I'm in the camp like, yes, data security is important. Yes, there are some people make an example, ERP is important. Engineers still don't know about ERP, but those are easy to get trained when you actually get into a company if you have no such need. But those broader stuff like the really knowing some general knowledge about other fields and also the critical thinking, those kind of things, I think that really, we really need that. But once you go to a company, company will try the best to give you those kind of lifelong learning, but I think mostly you pick it up while you're at school.
I think it's difficult to give a general answer, but there are two things. One is, to me, a good education is that people learn in whatever subject a deep dive, to dive deeply in a subject, whatever subject that is. And that's not to learn that subject, that's also a reason, but basically to learn how to learn. And that was said in various discussions. And that needs to have, you have to make as early as possible the experience how you really capture a topic that you really understand it in depth. So that means narrow and deep. On the other hand, we had that in engineering fields, that we were very narrow. And then we were not capable to solve problems. Most of the technical and societal problems are system or horizontal problems. So you need, at the same time, you need to have the skill to horizontally integrate and understand and structure problems, structure from different disciplines, and that is learning in a broader sense. And so I wouldn't answer that in general. It's more depending on where you start from. There are areas in academic education which are very narrow, perhaps too narrow, and we have some areas where I would say we intend to provide academic education, but it's just a very vague, broad education with no learning of a deep dive, and that is also very important.
Let's get to a specific type of employees within the companies, the managers, the CEOs. What about their digital skills and training?
Yeah. I know a lot of them who are still printing their emails, which is, of course, okay if they take the right decision out of it. So I think we have to lead by example, but that's a good question. We have a lot of motivated young people, the Generation Y, the Generation Z comes into the company, and they are very disruptive, also in the way they talk to each other, they talk to the managers. What we implemented is a reverse mentoring of our leadership team from the millennials. And this is very successful because we as a leader can learn from them to be open for new technology, for change, for asking ourselves, what do I have to learn from a digital skill perspective to increase the value of my role for the company. And so I think we have to lead by example. I drive it with my team. I try to motivate people. Interesting is really that the best way is the bottom-up approach. Find a critical mass of young people who tells the leaders every day that they have to change themselves, their behavior, and the way they work, and then it's a step-by-step approach. You get it into the head of every person. So I hope it's a long journey. It's a behavioral change because people who are 30 years in a company they worked in another way, and it was successful, of course, for that 30 years. But no, we have to start to change this culture, yeah, we do all what helps to go that direction.
Well, I think just to add 2 or 3 sentences to this, this is a complex problem, of course, and we just heard about the methods and the ways how IBM tries to cope with this situation. I think some of you know about the rather big number of research and studies and so on, which has a general outcome saying the top management is not very close worldwide, not very close to the digital world. This is considering the understanding, development of new business models, of disruptive approaches, down to dealing with a device. And I think this is a situation, because these are the decision makers worldwide, this is a situation where we cannot be happy with. To me, always when I read something like this, and I read such a headline almost every week, and nothing happens, and I think we should seriously think about a training program and an approach to improve the understanding of digitization in the top management.
It's actually the biggest problem of all what we discussed here. I mean, in my understanding, a good top manager is able to think the company, his company, for and in the future. And we have a majority of board members right now, today's experience, who need bottom-up very much help and indications and ideas, and then they more or less audit or judge them step by step. And that is not driving a company in a new business model, in a new approach, in new processes. That's the biggest gap, and you have to include even board of directors, Aufsichtsrat. I mean, that's the biggest potential we can achieve shortly if we find let's say, a social way to train top management, especially, you know, these proud top management people. These are those who were successful the last 10 years without digitalization. They believe, well, I survived that. That is our biggest problem. We have a minority of top management, especially of CEOs, who can think their company as a digitalized company. And that is the biggest gap.
Okay, so we talked now about the employees, different types of employees. I would like to switch to using the digital media as a tool to learn, for learning. What about your companies or your experience? If I can cite one more result from our survey we did, this has shown that 55% of the companies in Germany still rely on traditional concepts of training. So they use in-house courses with real trainers. And what do you think about it? Is this typical? I mean, IBM and Microsoft are IT companies, but still.
Yeah, maybe we are not as typical as other companies because people like to use technology, otherwise they wouldn't join our companies. Yeah, traditional concepts I think are still part of the training area and should be, because there's also an advantage of classroom training, networking, socializing, whatever. But it have to be combined with more flexible models, which enables us to do faster education, digital tools, even if it's a short video, a quick game to train the business control guidelines, whatever education people have to do. We have to make it interesting for them. And if you join a project and you need some education, that should be easy to consume. So a video or a small e-learning part combined with a shadowing or whatever to join a project, and that combined with a classroom training for bigger topics where you have to interact maybe with other people you cannot do online. I think that's the right mixture to do it. So I think on our company currently 65 to 70% e-learnings, the rest is classroom training. So not sure if it's at the end the right mix, but it definitely helps us to go faster in our education.
Well, I think we are performing very badly concerning this. It's a very open thing. And I just tell you some figures which underlines it. There is a special branch in the EdTech business. These are companies which are developing only web-based training things and nowadays online applications for training, learning, teaching within companies. And if you have a look at this in the US, the biggest company active in this market, in this field, has an annual turnover of roughly 160 to 180 million euros. The US is 4 times the inhabitants than we have in Germany. In Germany, the biggest company in this market has a turnover of slightly above 10 million euros. So we are far away from the usage of in-company, in-house training, vocational training by multimedia, by online purposes, compared to the US. And this is a big gap. There's big evidence also concerning this. And until today, it is really difficult to convince companies to move in the digital age to digital media in learning and training, at least in Germany.
Okay, so let's ask the audience for further questions. Are there any questions from the audience? There is one.
Hello, thank you very much for the very interesting debate. I wanted to ask about the learner models, or the models in general. We heard from Mr. Hon that in engineering, in motor building, there are models about when a certain part will fail, for example. And in learning, we also have models about learners, which tell us when will a learner learn something, what does he have to learn in the future, and so on. So we are always dealing with models. And those models will become more and more prevalent as we move further into the digital age. The question I have is this prevalence of models, is this more a risk or a chance that we have in terms of digitalization? Because do these models allow for, say, career paths that are not standard, that do not comply with what most people do? So do we have the flexibility in the models that we particularly apply to the learners that we want to get into the companies to allow for different paths of careers, to allow for different paths of knowledge acquisition and so forth?
Good question, difficult question. I would say, yes, we need models, and yes, we have to have more possibilities to have individual pieces at the same time. However, I'm personally at least a bit afraid of about too much creativity in a formula education. I mean, all at least the phrasing and the names of the studies you can do nowadays is not always helpful. You can overdo that in a way that somebody who wants to employ the finishing student, he or she, the HR chief, needs to know what's in it. So what was in the program, and not just doing that course by course. So we are going the other direction. We want to make sure that 60–70% of an Aachen mechanical engineer, you always know what's in it. And so that is standardized on purpose, and just some 30%. And in that, we try to be even more open. Is that at least a part of an answer to your question? Okay.
Maybe let me add, I think the individualization will come later on. If the people join the company, there's a lot of individualization in their education. So I think, yeah, it's really right. You should, at the end, it's like a badge, you know. If you come from a special university, I know as an HR person what's in, and what's in for me if I hire this person. I think it's still a credit for the person. Yeah.
There was this further question here.
Is it on? Yes, perfect. We are here in the town of Einstein, and he said we need a new thinking because the old approaches gave rise to this problematic we have. So my question, there is a general model theory. We heard now the word model very often, but model thinking in education was done 40 years ago here in Germany by Herbert Stachowiak. So we should watch not only our words, but our metaphors, and not only our imagination. So my question is, I heard a lot about horizontal and vertical, maybe lateral thinking. Have you ever thought about multimodal thinking? Because this is an approach taking various approaches into one. A town, the traffic system is multimodal. Our body with our senses is multimodal. So there's work on this since 24 years. We just presented it in Turku 2 weeks ago. Please revisit to step out of the box and not always try to follow with our old thinking, trying to address the new problems or the problematic.
I would say that was a good question and a good answer. I would say yes to the answer.
I will use a different word. Particularly, you talk about lifelong learning in the company. I would say either you call them multi-model, I will call them modelless. I mean, the people just need to find a style they feel like. I mean, particularly, how do we teach creativity? I mean, I don't believe there will be a model. I mean, people can propose model, and I think you just need to find something you feel comfortable. And the other thing I also want to point out, the previous question about do we want to build expectation? If you learn, you will advance your career. Macro level, you can say people will tend to learn more, probably have better career at the end. But I also think we should not be too much result oriented. I think we need to live learning as a life, and I think it's not really just looking for short term. Well, if I pass this degree, pass this learning, I will get some certain job. In the new world we are facing, it's not like that. But still, I hope the macro level, all the statistics will give people enough motivation to do a lifelong learning.
A question for you about companies' abilities to really carefully measure the value of their training approaches. Do you feel like companies are good at understanding the impact of the different training programs on overall corporate value, or is that one of these missing areas that might really be important to go after?
Yeah, at the end, it's the success of the company, you know. And if a project is successful, but it's a broad range, of course, of measurements you can use. Of course, you can do a skill assessment, and you can do an assessment from the manager, from peers, how valuable was a person in a Scrum model, in a project. So it's a 360-degree if you want to use that. Of course, it could be an official badge, but it's really hard. At the end, it's really, is a person able to work in the environment I need him for? And this is a judgment he can do by himself, and he will get back in an open community from the others. And we should help him to get the feedback. I think this is important if we want to use an open, maybe model-less environment. Direct feedback is important to get a picture of where I am and where I should be from a skill perspective.
If I may add, I think that is a very, very good point, and we are not at all good enough in measuring the result of such educational program. And I think if we want to come as an overall engagement to more lifelong learning, we have to alter the balance sheets and these rules in balance sheets of companies, so that education effort has to be activated. And if we achieve that, we will have a much broader approach and activity in that direction. But for that, it would be a prerequisite to be capable to at least sufficiently measure results of these education. Otherwise, you can't activate them in your company's balance sheet. And nowadays, all investments of companies in their people are, in terms of a balance sheet, are loss. And we have to change that. And a prerequisite is exactly your question. We have to be capable to measure that much better, to put the result as a value indication into our balance sheets.
Okay. So I suggest that each of you finishes with one sentence giving an advice to a company, your own company or other companies, how to keep the employees well trained with respect to digital skills. Please, one sentence. What is your advice?
I can start. So I think change the behavior of the people and make them open-minded, to be open for new skills, behavior, whatever is needed to fight the future.
Fight for lifelong learning.
Be innovative and trust the process.
In company, learning is not an operation, it's a culture.
Thank you very much.